This video will be a review of the pen tool and some of the various different things that we can do in the pen tool. So let's get started. Size page up to point or to inches, changing it from points. And I like the landscape just because it gives me a bigger area to work with. Say create, and here we have our artboard. Right. So when we look at the pen tool, if I click and hold down, there's a variety of stuff underneath here. If I want this to stay open like this, I can come over here and click, there we go, on that little triangle. So let's try that again just so you can see it. So I'm going to click and hold, and I'm going to come here, and when I hold that triangle, now I have a floating palette of tools. Okay, so let's move this out of the way. We don't really need this. I can dock that over there. Okay, so the very first one is the pen, right? Notice the little star at the bottom of the icon and watch how it changes. So clicking, right? And notice here, bottom right corner, we're getting the circle, which means that I'm closing the path. Okay, so we have that. Let's try and create something a little bit different. So with the polygon, we're just clicking. We are not holding the mouse down, the left click button, or anything like that, as opposed to a curved shape where we are going to click and hold that down. So all in one motion, I'm clicking, holding that left button down, and I'm stretching out this Bezier curve handle. Some people will pick this up quickly, some people may struggle with this. It takes a minute to get used to it. So here we go. Curve handles will affect the direction of the curve. Think of a trajectory coming out of something. So if I was going to make a circle and I'm going to go around counterclockwise, I'm going to put this down and then I'm going to let go. Okay. So now I'm going to go down about this far. Generally, you want your curve handles to go about a third of the distance that you want for that, keeping in mind the trajectory like I was just saying. So here I'm going to click, holding the left click button down and dragging straight down. Okay. Clicking, going to the right. Okay. Notice how the trajectories are changing here. Okay. Click and drag, keeping that left click button down. All right. And now, the same as we saw with the polygon, when we bring it back around, we're going to get that circle. Okay. So you might say, but Mr. E, that doesn't look like a very nice circle. Well, remember our selection tools up here. If I click on selection tool, I can move the whole object. Okay. And if I click on the direct selection tool, I can move points within that object, and I can move my curve handles as well. So sometimes you'll need to make them shorter, sometimes a little bit longer. Okay. I like to try and keep my curves when I can going at these right angles, especially if you're doing something like the letter S or something along those lines. So here we go. So it's looking a little rounder. It's not going to be perfectly round because if we wanted a perfectly round, we use the ellipse tool and hold down the shift key, right? So there we have the basics for a polygon and a curved object. Okay, so let's say we wanted to delete a point. I can select, or let's say I wanted to add a point. Let's say I want to make this look like more like a house or something. So I'm going to use my selection tool. I'm going to move that whole object down a little bit. All right, and I'm going to click on the Add Anchor Point tool. If I click in here, now I've added an anchor point. I can come over, get my direct selection tool. Now I can edit that. Okay. If I want to delete a point, Let's say I want to make the circle look really funky. This is your delete anchor point tool. Come in here, and I can delete that. Okay. Kind of like it the way it was, so I'm going to hit Control Z, which will undo that. Right. Let's say I wanted to change a point to a curve, or put a corner in a curve. This is the anchor point tool. Using the anchor point tool, I can click and drag just like I was with the pen tool, but now I'm creating a curve out of this just by clicking and dragging. Okay, so not so psyched about that one. Let's undo that. Let's say I want to put a corner in a curve. Okay, so here you can turn your curves on and off with the anchor point tool. Or let's say you had a curve and you wanted to put a corner there. You can modify that shape. I'm going to hit A to get the direct selection tool. Now I have that, and then I can come back using the anchor control point, anchor tool, right? Now I can put a corner in that curve. So these are still curved objects, but there's a hard stop. Okay, so that's just some of the basics that you can do. Practice a little bit and get a hang for how you're going to draw those curves. Ultimately, what you want to be able to do is to take your pen tool and trace over something. So what would happen if I create a new layer? I'm going to lock down this bottom layer. By locking it, that means if I try and select something with my selection tool, I cannot. Okay? You get the layer tool by hitting F7, or if it's over here in the dock. I can turn off visibility in layers, and you can change the color of a layer if you need to. So over here, it says light blue, we could make this something like cyan. Now anything that I select in that layer is going to be cyan, as opposed to if I make a new object here, it's going to have a red line. So let's see about tracing something here just real quickly. So I'm going to come up here under View, and I'm going to turn off Smart Guides just to make it a little bit harder. So now you'll notice I don't have those snappy things, where it says path and it'll snap right to that point. So let's see. I'm going to click, and then I'm going to click, but now I'm going to, oops, let's try that again. Control Z. I'm going to click, and now I have two polygon points. I can click and drag from that anchor point out. Okay, and I'm following this trajectory a bit. Okay, about a third of the way, and then I'm going to click here and drag down. So you'll notice it's not quite exactly the way I want. Now, if you want to turn off your anchor point or your Bezier curve, you can click on that point, come back around, and close that path. So let's say I'm not really happy with this, and I want to edit this a little bit more. What would happen if I click right on the line? Okay, so this is yet another way you can edit your curves. Okay, so with the pen tool, a lot of times you may be creating freehand. Generally, I think you're maybe tracing something. Okay, so let's take a look. We'll change the color of this. I'm going to turn off the fill by clicking on the fill color, going to none. I'm going to bring up my stroke to the foreground, and I'm going to make that stroke red. So now we can zoom in. I'm going to hold down the space bar and the control key, and we can zoom in. See what we've got. So it's pretty close. Depending on how tight you want your objects to be, how much of a perfectionist you are, you can fine tune this endlessly. Okay, so that's just the basics of the pen tool. We'll take a look at how to digitize something in the next video.